Hello, everyone. Welcome to part two of this session around working with our imposter. And in today's session, we're really going to be shining a light on what this syndrome is so that we can really start to understand it and how it features in our lives and what we can then, once we've got some understanding, how we can then start to change our relationship with it. So we've got lots coming up. This, as hopefully you all know, is part of a 4-part program. And last time we focused on our concept of success, and we had a really lively session. Some amazing questions were asked. And in today's session, we're going to be looking, as I mentioned, up close about what this actually is. Next time, we'll be looking at how we start to change our relationship with it. And then lastly, focusing on resilience and taking risks. So in today's session, I want us to all really be able to recognize what this is, increase your awareness as to when and where it shows up, and then reflect on the factors that cause it to be really powerful. You know, some of us struggle with it more than others. I've had it for a very long time. And so this really is a culmination of some tips and techniques and reframes that have really helped me along the way. So I hope that you'll be geared up and fired up by the end of it. In terms of what to expect, like last time, I'd like some interaction. There'll be some time for questions at the end, and I'll circulate the recording and the resources as well. So it is being recorded, and when you submit your chat responses to me, you can choose as to whether you'd like those to be anonymous or not. So how does feeling like an imposter impact you at the moment? What kinds of things does it mean for you? Is it causing you a lot of stress and anxiety? Is it maybe preventing you from going for opportunities, jobs? How is it getting in your way? Makes you doubt yourself all the time, makes me lose confidence. Yeah, stops me making next steps. Feel like I'm not good enough. Huge anxiety, lack of sleep. Okay, yeah, not feeling good enough. Stops me asking questions. I think that's a big one. When we feel like we should know the answer. Kirsty, I noticed you've got your hand up. I just wondered if you wouldn't mind just jotting it down in the chat. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Last time, some people had to refresh their browser, and then you could hear me. Some of you feel out of your depth, very common. Okay. Yeah, makes me doubt myself before giving your opinion, especially if you're in a big meeting, not feeling like I'm as good as other people. Okay, thank you for sharing those. So, how do you imagine your life might change if you felt less like an imposter? You've talked about what, your lack of confidence and lack of anxiety. Is it the complete flip of that? Would you imagine that you would just ask those questions without doubting yourself? You'd go for more opportunities. You'd sleep better. Yeah, you'd feel more comfortable in your own skin. Clear career progression. You'd take more risks. Put myself forward for more things. Okay, wonderful. More confidence. Okay, so what I'd really like you to do is just make a note of those things that you would really like to do. And then by the end of the program, you can just review that and go, do I feel like I've got some tools now to actually take me further towards that goal? I'd feel stronger in helping others. Okay, great. Okay, thank you for sharing those. So let's now shine a light on what the imposter syndrome is, because there is actually an awful lot of misconceptions and misinformation out there. So The imposter syndrome is this internal experience of self doubt. Many of you've just referenced that. It's believing that you're not as competent as others actually perceive you to be. Uh, and this is coupled with feeling like you're going to get exposed. So this is feeling like you might have achieved some great things in your career. Other people perceive you to be really successful, but inside you feel like it's only a matter of time before you get found out. You only have got to where you've got to due to luck, timing, the fact that someone liked you, or the fact that maybe there was some mistake made. Um, and so, yeah, despite this objective success, it just isn't mirrored internally. Uh, I when I this is going back a long way now, but I was the only person in my GCSE class at school to pass my maths test, my maths exam. And I was so convinced that they had made a mistake that I never went to get my breakdown. So you can see how long it's been with me for a while. So yes, it's just this like you just can't believe that you would have achieved what you've achieved. Now, one of the important things I want to impress upon you is that it is not a syndrome. A syndrome is a set of medical maladies and symptoms correlated to result in a disease or a disorder. And the thing about the syndrome is I think it connotates it is a thing that you're born with or you're saddled with for the rest of your life, but it actually isn't. Graham, I've noticed you raised your hand. If you wouldn't mind just jotting something in the chat, then I can come back to you at the end. So when it was first discovered, it was first researched by two researchers, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Ims, and their paper was this: the imposter phenomenon in high achieving women. So they called it a phenomenon, and then somehow in our language, it's become a syndrome. So some of the hallmarks are, as I just mentioned, we attribute our success to luck, timing, the fact that someone liked us, the fact that we worked really hard. And then when we make a mistake or there is some sort of failure that we've been involved in, we then just take it all on our shoulders. That's just proof that we're not as good as everybody thinks we are. We don't belong here. So we sort of magnify when things go wrong and take all of that on our shoulders. But when things go right, we externalize it. Or we'll say things like, oh, anyone could have done it. God, if I could do it, you can do it. Or if our team has done a great piece of work, we might say, well, it was all down to the team, which is, of course, a lovely thing to do. It's just hard for us to receive and accept that we had quite a big part to play in it. So a big part of changing our relationship with the imposter phenomenon, I'm going to call it from now, is that we need to close this gap. So when you have and you experience some success, it's about stretching this muscle, this receiving muscle, so that you can allow some of that in and you can recognize that actually it was in part down to your skills, talents, intelligence, hard work, all of those things. And that gives us agency to start to change and this gap. Good. Some of you are saying we've just hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Well, this is why I'm glad you're here. And we really need to address it, which is why I'm so glad so many of you are on the call, because Einstein famously said this really close to up until he, something like a month before his death, said to a close friend, the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. This was Einstein. And other high profile people have talked about it. Maya Angelou, a poet, Sheryl Sandberg, chief operating officer at Facebook, has written a book called Lean In, and she talks about it in there. So some people think it is something that people get at the beginning of their career, and that's true, can be true. But if we don't take action to, change it, it can follow us right to the end of our career. And it doesn't necessarily go away without any work, because the higher you go, the more is at stake, the further you worry that you have to fall. So you're not alone. Around 70% of people feel it at times. It is something that men and women suffer with. That paper was focusing on women to begin with, but it is many of us, whatever gender, suffer with it. They just deal with it differently. It's quite interesting that women, I think a lot of people think women do suffer from it more broadly, because somehow it's more culturally okay for women to talk about their feelings and are therefore more practiced at it, whereas men might feel it, but then they don't really want to talk about it. Women, sometimes some women have a bit more of a tendency then to lean into the struggle, whereas men, certain men will just then hang out with different people. So anyway, point being is both sexes can be afflicted by it. So just to recap, it's at its core, it's a limiting belief which causes us a lot of stress and fear. It's not a medical malady, but it can lead to anxiety and depression and burnout. And anxiety and depression are thought of as disorders. Some people sort of use this sense of imposterism as a motivator. You know, that's what drives me to get these high standards. If I didn't have it, then I wouldn't be as motivated. And I think that's I want to challenge that, because I think there are other ways of motivating yourself. This can be very painful and debilitating, as you've all mentioned. Yeah, so it's not the best way to keep us humble and motivated. So now that we know what it is, I want to spend some time reflecting on, when and where it shows up in your life. And maybe you're very familiar when and where it shows up, but I think it's helpful for you to recognize that there's loads of people who are probably feeling a similar thing at a similar juncture. So there are 3 conditions in which it thrives. The first is when we're doing something new or we're inexperienced. And this can be really difficult for people who are high achieving, because they want to crush it for the first time. They hate not being able to do something or get quick, good results. So when you're doing something new, be prepared for these imposter feelings to flood in. But one of the things I feel really strongly about is those of us and those organizations who can learn and innovate and do new creative work are those that are going to survive. And if we feel paralyzed by fear and we don't innovate and we don't move out of our comfort zone where things are new and unpredictable and uncomfortable, we're not going to be growing. We're going to be stagnant. We might even be going backwards. So I really want to impress upon you that doing something new, can you try and reframe it in your mind as, this is exciting. Yes, it's unpredictable. Yes, it's uncertain. And yet it's also a sign that you're moving out of your comfort zone. So the things to sort of tell yourself when you're doing something new is, it is going to be a bit cringy and uncomfortable to start with. It's probably going to take you longer than you anticipate, and just manage your expectations that it's going to take a while until you get this right. But you're learning and you're growing and you're developing, and hopefully you can take some credit for doing that, because it is a really important thing to help us fuel our future, as it were. I think the other thing to say, and this is something that I had to struggle quite a lot with, is that we want to discern between feeling like an imposter, which is when we're feeling very fraudulent, and being an amateur. So an amateur is simply someone that just doesn't have that much experience. someone with imposter syndrome or phenomenon, those feelings, feels like they just shouldn't be at the table at all. They just shouldn't be. They're just in the wrong place, and someone thinks that I'm better than I am, and all of those things. So it's a subtle distinction, but it's quite a profound distinction that's helped me think, can I just see myself as an amateur, someone that's a novice, and I'm here to learn, rather than a fraud that any minute I'm going to get exposed. So the second place it can arise and thrive, yes, as Claire says, I can't do this yet. I haven't done it yet. That word "yet" is really important in terms of how we approach something and the mindset in which we approach something. It's one of the words that Carol Dweck in her book Growth Mindset talks about a lot. So the second way that it thrives is when we're involved in something that has a lot of complexity, and there are many ways that this could go wrong, and you're feeling like, I've just got to, at the cost of everything, at the expense of everything else, just focus on this, because if I'm not across every single bit of this, it's all going to go wrong, it's all going to come crashing down. And the third way it can really thrive is if you believe like you're the only one, and yet the visibility is very high on this project. So if you believe like, and if you are to an extent, you might be the only woman in a very male-dominated environment. You might be, person of color and you're the minority. And so those are some of the ingredients in which it can really thrive. And I mention those because once you're aware of when it can really surface, you then are in a stronger position to manage it. So yeah, novelty, complexity, minority, and all of those things, when especially sort of fans the flames when there's a lot of eyes on the project. So you might be pleased to know that there is actually a cycle in which we sort of spin around, and this can be just quite helpful to be aware of. So the cycle starts really when we are given a task, a project, there's a deadline, and that then can trigger two things. We can either go down the procrastination route, or we go into sort of overdrive. And if we go down the procrastination route, this is partly because we are very driven by excellent work. We want to make sure that our standards are really high. That makes us feel safe. That's what people approve of. That's what we've learned through school. We need to get really, really good results. But in order to get those really good results, we have to work really, really hard. And that's quite stressful and often isn't very pleasant. And so some of us can just put it off. We just put it off. I'll just clean the house. I'll just put the thing off. Or we go into overdrive immediately. Everything else gets pushed aside, sole focus. So then we hit the deadline, we hand in the work, we deliver the presentation, we do the thing, and it can either go one of two ways, well, a range of ways, but let's imagine it went really well. You then might feel this brief moment of elation and some relief. And then you go into a process by which you evaluate or you rationalize that. So if it went really well, you might go, well, other people could have done that a lot easier. Other people wouldn't have had to have worked so hard. Oh my God, if now I've done that, they're going to give me something else, which might be even harder. And then they're definitely going to find out that I'm not as good as everybody thinks I am. And then so on goes the anxiety and stress. If the results weren't quite as good as you were hoping, partly because it was all done in a rush, because it was the procrastination route that you followed, then it just serves as, see, I'm not as good as everybody thinks I am. And it's just further proof that you're in the wrong place. You're not as good as everybody thinks you are. and any moment you're going to be thrown off the project or fired, or you're just waiting for the call. And it's such an uncomfortable phenomenon. So I'd love to get a sense from you, which are your tendencies? Are they to overwork, or are they to procrastinate, or is it a mix of both? Procrastinate, overwork, bit of both. Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope just having some awareness of the pattern, you can start to interrupt. Yeah, procrastinating then. Okay. So when you're feeling like an imposter, what is that inner voice saying to you? Is it, I've mentioned some of the things that, I used to hear, which is like, oh my gosh, it's only a matter of time. Oh my gosh, you should know that by now. Oh, don't ask the question. Um, what is it? You can't do it. How am I going to do this? I'm not good enough. I'm useless. Okay. You don't deserve this. It's luck. They might think you're an idiot. You should know this. Yeah. When will they realize? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure I've forgotten all my exam knowledge. How on earth did I get here? Yeah. Okay. I knew you'd mess up. Okay. I'm going to be called out for being a fraud. Okay. So the reason I'm asking that, not to is really just so that you can build your awareness that they are just thoughts. And very often if we're quite new to this work, we can feel when the voice are in our heads that's our voice, and these thoughts are true. And what I want to really underline as we go through the program is they are just thoughts. They can feel they can feel very real, but they are not true. And as you develop your awareness, you can start to try and separate yourself from your thoughts. So just a quick differentiator between non-imposters and those of us that have the imposter feelings is that, it's really normal to feel nervous or anxious when you're doing something new. Very often that signals that you care, that you really want this to go well. But those people we have these feelings of imposterism, we have also can experience a sense of shame as well, that our sort of sense of worth is on the line when we're handing in some work or doing a presentation or being evaluated in any way. So often people who, doing new work or doing some new information or some research, when they come across some new information, they go, oh, interesting. Whereas some of us that have impostering traits say, and some of you mentioned it, oh, I should have known that. Why didn't I know that? I should have known that. And so that can be a difference, and that can sort of really hamper our enjoyment of learning and developing. So one of the key things that I really want to try and take you to take away from today's session is it's important to discern the difference between measuring our doing and our being. And when I began down this line of work, there was definitely a part of me that felt like, well, if I get rid of my imposter feelings and my perfectionism and my control freakerism, does that mean I'm going to start turning in sloppy work because I just feel I'm worried I'm going to get a bit complacent? And what I hadn't appreciated is that there is this difference between our being, our sense of self, and what we do, how we behave. And this is also the difference between shame and guilt. So shame is I am bad, guilt is I did something bad. And so we have to remember that we are not our behavior. If we make a mistake, that is a mistake that we made through our behavior. It's not that we are bad. We are not bad people. And that's an important differentiator that often gets conflated in our minds, particularly those of us that feel like we are perfectionists. And then when people say to us other misguided advice, oh, just do something that's good enough, just do 80% good enough. That for us is completely impossible because we derive a sense of safety from feeling like we achieve a lot. So for us to then go dial it back and try not to aspire to great and high standards makes us feel very unsafe. And so I want to, in a moment, show you how we can start to dismantle that fusing that we've often done in our minds. So let's spend a little bit of time reflecting on why it's so powerful. Like, how has it got such a grip in our psyche, in our being, and is creating havoc, in a lot of your lives, as you were mentioning earlier. And you won't be surprised to know, some of you alluded to already, that it really comes from messages that we picked up in our childhood. So, for example, if you've got siblings and you were deemed or labeled the smart one, and then you came across some work or at school assignment or exams and you found them really difficult, you were like, hang on, I'm supposed to be the smart one and I'm finding this really difficult. That must mean I'm not as smart as everybody thinks I am. Another Conversely, if you were deemed the creative one or the chatty one, and your sibling was deemed as the smart one, you've labeled yourself as, oh, I'm not the clever one, so I'm going to have to work extra hard to get the results that are deemed valuable, and that's what gets you attention, and ultimately that's what keeps you safe, because our caregivers were our means of survival, and so we wouldn't do anything really to jeopardize that sense of attachment, that sense of safety. So those are some either we were the smart one and then we found it difficult, and there was this gap between what we feel like we should be able to do and what we are doing, or we were the converse and we weren't labeled the clever one, and therefore we have got to do everything we can to try and keep up. Yes. So it's when you understand a little bit more about attachment theory, and it makes sense that we had to keep ourselves safe. That was our primary survival drive. We were unable to look after ourselves, and therefore we would not do anything to jeopardize that survival link with our caregivers or our teachers. Sometimes it was important authoritative figures that would label us, and those labels have wormed their way in to our sense of identity, and sometimes they can be helpful and sometimes they can be really unhelpful. Yeah, I remember all my sister's GCSE results, which were fantastic, but not mine. Yeah. And I really, I really hope the school system is starting to change a bit, because we all learn in different ways. And yet many of us will have been at school and taught in a way that just wasn't appropriate for everybody. And that has left us leaving, quite a mark on us. Yeah, your family backgrounds, the families that you hung out with, a lot of people feel imposter. It's like the minority point. If a lot of people were highly educated and you went to a state school, and then it's that minority thing again, it can just make you feel I don't belong here. And yet I am such a believer in diversity. Everybody has got a different approach and a different opinion and different experience, and all are needed and all are valid. So yeah, I think it's helpful for us to reflect on the labels that we carry. So it may be that you are a people pleaser, are label yourself as I'm a perfectionist, I'm a control freak, I'm a good mum, or I'm a good dad, I'm an imposter. So I'd like you to uh, think about this for the next week. What are those labels? And it's important to realize that we would rather be consistent than happy. So if we've got this identity as a perfectionist or as a control freak, that will typically dictate our behaviors. And some of those behaviors might be quite unconscious. And what I want us to do is shine a light on what some of those unconscious beliefs that we've got, those labels, and what that means for our behavior. What rules are we following in order that our identity is consistent? Oh gosh, Kathy, yes, that's horrendous. Um, I mean, shame is never a good way to change somebody's behavior. It just is never a good way to go. We learn best when we feel safe, when we feel like someone believes in us. When we feel shame, we feel very threatened, and that shuts down a lot of areas of our brain, and we go into survival mode. And what happens when we go into survival mode, many of you will know, is that blood rushes from our prefrontal cortex, the part that's creative, the part that's focused, that can responsible for language, and it goes into our heart and our legs so that we can run away. So if we're terrifying people into learning, what we're doing is we're actually reducing the capacity of their brain to take on information, to think creatively. So hopefully, when teachers, I think it is different now, but I think back many years ago, people just didn't have an understanding of how brains absorb and process information. So just back to this, yeah, we would rather be consistent than happy. And consistency, is important because it brings us certainty, it brings us clarity. We know where we are if we're this type of person. It gives us control, and ultimately it brings us safety. So these are all good things. No one wants to live in ever changing chaos. It's just, I think we need to evaluate whether the rule or the behavior that we may be unconsciously following in order to keep our identity consistent is serving us. And this means that sometimes our need for consistency blurs our that identity blurs with our behavior. So just just take perfectionism as an example, because I think many of you probably will identify as being a perfectionist because we strive for these high standards. And when you look at what the ingredients of perfectionism are, they are a need for high standards and over evaluation. And I am a big fan of high standards. This is why I found it really difficult when people were like saying, oh, just dial it back. Oh, it's good enough. And that was really unhelpful. I just was like, I didn't really understand what a perfectionist was or why it was a bad thing, because it meant that you delivered good work. But the over evaluation bit is the bit that we are then conflating our sense of self, our sense of worth, our being with that good result. And what we have to try and do is separate our sense of self from our actions, from our behavior. And then we can start, delivering good work and enjoying it for the process, but not feeling like our entire sense of self is on the line, is on the line to be judged, for evaluated, and therefore, often feels like we're going to be pulled up short. We're going to be exposed as a fraud. And all of those scary things that can really fuel a lot of the anxiety that you were mentioning. So yeah, this is what the over evaluation means. It's we're conflating our sense of self-worth with our performance, and we need to tease them apart. So yeah, what I'd like you to do as a reflection between now and next time is not to sort of ignore or it's not to ignore that label or the actions that mean that you're just blindly conforming with it. It's to ask, is that label directing your behavior in unnecessary ways? So are you saying things like, I have to do this thing because I'm this type of person, or I can't do that because I'm a introvert, or because I'm shy, or because that's not for people like me? And so that's really what I wanted to leave you with. I mean, I know we've got some time. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions this time because we had so many last time. And also I feel like I might have shared some quite big things that, if you're relatively new to this, need quite a lot of reflection to get your heads around. And if you're very familiar with this, then hopefully this has served as a good reminder. So what we covered was, hopefully you feel a bit clearer on what the imposter syndrome is. It's just this gap in perception. It's coupled with, feeling inadequate and feeling like you're going to be found out. Very common in high achievers. And I'm really hoping that you can see that you have worth because you were born. It's not contingent on your performance, although that's the message that we might have picked up growing up, which is why we have this set of beliefs and rules and identities now. So it will often get quite intense in three situations: when we're doing something new, when we're doing something that's very complex, or when we're like the only one. And so what I found to be quite useful, if you do feel like you're the only one, could you put yourself in a situation where you listen to a podcast about people who have imposter phenomenon? So you know other people in other firms that also struggle with it, and so in that way you're making yourself not the minority, because you're buddying up at maybe it's after work or something like that, to talk it through so that you don't feel like the outsider or the only one. And then lastly, helping you to reflect on the factors that have caused it to be so powerful. A lot of it is through the messages that we picked up through childhood, and then what we made it mean. It's no wonder that we did end up making it mean the things we did, because our survival was very dependent on our caregivers. And so we just believe everything that they say because we didn't have enough experience at the time to question it. We might have wondered, oh, is that right? But now, the thing is that now we're older and hopefully wiser, and we have more agency over where we direct our thoughts. But yeah, so it's our responsibility to try and change it now. I'm not interested in sort of laying blame at people's doors. It's up to us to change our relationship with our thoughts. So that's all I wanted to cover. I'm very open to questions now, but in terms of things to do before next week, look out for the follow-up email. Amanda will send that around, and I am recording it, so you can have the recording. Yes, Louisa, the recording of last time is still available. I can ask. I can just send me an email afterwards, and I'll send it to you. I'll put my email address on the last slide. So yeah, reflect on your labels and your behavior. Think about what maybe things that you're doing unconsciously that you just do because that's who you are. And I want to question, is that serving you? We spoke a lot last time about the type of person that you want to become. This is we're doing it in the reverse here. Part 2 will be next Thursday at the same time. And there we're going to be looking at some of the ways that we can relate to these feelings and some of the ways that we can relate to these thoughts. This one is really all about gaining our awareness. If you haven't already, I've got sign up to my fortnightly newsletter. It's called The Kinder Reminder. And really, it's just brief poems and questions, all in service to help you be kinder to yourself, to speak to yourself in kinder ways. So we have got some time for questions now. So fire away. You can do that through the chat or through the Q&A. I love this week's kind of reminder. I shared it with my colleagues. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, they're really fun for me to create. Let me just open the Q&A. Okay, so what about the opposite, where you're overconfident and you're putting in less effort to tasks or duties? That's interesting. I think that's often not associated with imposter syndrome. I guess I'm not quite sure what your question is there. Is your question how to motivate yourself more, or maybe it's you're working with someone who is in your team who feels like they're perhaps they've misjudged their skill and their actual output. Are there any tips to prevent passing this on to our children unconsciously, of course? Yes. So I think, and I definitely know that schools are better at doing this. This is really helping kids to recognize that they've got worth just because they've been born, and rewarding effort, not necessarily results. So there's a really brilliant book called Good Inside. It's a parenting book by an author called Dr. Becky. Her surname has just left me momentarily, but she's all about raising kids who are self-assured, secure, and she's really funny in how she teaches stuff. And I've actually learned loads from her as well. I don't have children, but I really like the way that she communicates and conveys difficult messages in a really sort of loving but firm way. So I'd look up Dr. Becky. I'll add her book in the resources list that I'll circulate. So yeah, I think a lot of essentially it's about, if you're looking to change behavior, it's about not shaming someone. It's not telling someone they are bad because they did a thing. It's telling that they behaved in a way that you didn't like. Yes, motivation. Okay. What about the opposite when you are overconfident? I think ultimately it depends on what's going to motivate you. We're driven I mean, it's a big question. It's that we're motivated in lots of different ways. And I think, yeah, I have to think about, let me come back to that question. Let me come back to that question because we've got a few more in. Is being an overachiever and imposter the same thing? I don't think so. I think when we use the word overachiever, I never really know what people mean by that. I think some people will say, oh, she's an overachiever. And I think what they mean by that, the bit that they're not saying, is compared to me. So there's an evaluation going on there. You know, ultimately we have the capacity to achieve what we want to achieve, and maybe that's how we feel like we're reaching and fulfilling our potential. So I think overachiever or high achiever is one thing, and maybe people can strive for high standards without feeling like, or being motivated by the fact that they're going to get found out or thrown off the project, or it's only a matter of time until they're being found out. So I think, in answer to your question, it depends on the motivation for those results. Achieving high standards doesn't necessarily mean that you suffer with imposter syndrome. Dr. Becky Kennedy, thank you. Someone has just pop it in. Thank you. Good Inside. Thank you for putting that. Yeah, Good Inside, Becky Kennedy. Is there a way, or are there tools to overcome overthinking? Yes, there are, and we are going to be focusing on that next time. A lot of it, like many things, is first of all just being aware of those thoughts that are recurring and recurring and recurring. I think it's something like we think the same thoughts, some staggering figure like 60% of our day. A lot of it is down to mindfulness and being able to have enough ground and awareness to choose to fuel different thoughts. It's quite a CBT approach. But I'm also going to bring in a new model next week around acceptance and commitment therapy, which I found to be super helpful, which is really all about values. So are you behaving in a way that is aligned with your values rather than the rules that are keeping you safe, or at least did keep you safe when you were a child? Do we know what causes imposter syndrome? I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning. A lot of it has come from messages that we picked up in childhood. Is there anything like, how do I join next week's webinar? Amanda will send out the registration, or on my website, which is www.motem.co.uk. If you just go to the upcoming events, you can join. The joining link is on that page. Is there anything like a quote of the day, a diary notepad that you've come across that could give us a nice reminder every day? Oh, yes. I mean, that I haven't actually. I just about managed my fortnightly one. But I'll keep my eyes open. That it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to find the good ones, because there's a lot of sort of rubbishy ones out there. But no, I haven't. Is answer to your question. I got the I love a gratitude jar. Yeah. Oh, the App Store has got a quote of the day. That's useful. Have a look at that. Thank you. Thank you, Tristan. Part four, Amanda's just put that in the chat for everyone. Did you put chat 3 in as well? Yeah, you've put chat 3 in as well. Okay, thank you. How are we doing for time? Oh, we've got a few more minutes. So any more questions? Not a question. This has been really light bulb moment for me and explains why I've been struggling in areas. And it's nice knowing I can change these feelings for the better. I cannot thank you enough. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a topic, as you can tell, that's close to my heart, because as we saw at the beginning, it really impacts our quality of life, and it doesn't have to. So yeah, so glad. Oh, thank you, Kate. Diary planners with positive messages. I don't know. Yeah, is that? I wonder if that's the. There's also Donna Ashworth, I think, as sometimes I share her poems in my kind of reminder. I think she came out with a journal as well, just over the beginning of the year. She's someone that I really like her work. She's very accessible, and I think has struggled with grief and anxiety a lot. So might be worth checking her out as well. Does denial feed the imposter syndrome? I think certainly denial feeds a lot of things, because it basically means we're not leaning into it, or we're not addressing it. So we're just carrying on behaving in that unconscious way. So the short answer, right, is I would say yes, it does. Denial feeds a lot of things. But denial also, the positive of a denial is sometimes we just don't have the capacity to look at something. Our stress bucket is very full, and we have a very overloaded plate, and we just don't have the capacity to look at something. So yeah, sometimes it does, but sometimes we have to be kind to ourselves that we just can't take on all of these big things all at once. So Donna Ashford, thank you. Great. Any more for any more? Just put my LinkedIn profile there if you want to connect, and my email address in case you would rather ask me a question directly. But if there aren't any more, hang on, what's going on? But if there aren't any more questions, I think what I'll do is I will I'll finish there, and I hope to see you next week, where we'll really start to give some practical ideas for how to change your relationship with your imposter feelings. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.